think that's important in medicine. I tell people I train and people I want to help, it doesn't matter how smart you are. You can be the smartest doctor in the world. If people don't trust you or want to come to you, you can't help them. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
So run to win. And I remember I said, Hollis, wait a minute, that's in the Bible, run to win? And they all pointed out, yes, it is. Be the best you can be. And that's the way our guys thought about it. We're going to work hard. We're going to practice hard. We're going to be the best we can be because that's what God expects.
Tony and Lloyd are going to share with us some life and leadership lessons that shaped them along their journeys. Lessons they were taught or lessons that they've learned along the way. I believe you will be truly blessed by some of the success and leadership lessons that they can share. I know I certainly have in my life. Their journeys from athlete to their current level of success and leadership are lessons in determination, diligence, dedication to being better, and being open to following the path of opportunities that God prepares for us, even when unexpected and disappointing things occur. So one of the things, because I am a fan of teams and the team concept, and no matter what you do, in medicine and in law, and I think there's a team concept where you have to work together to be the best that you can, and you have one goal, whatever that might be. Would you agree with that, Lloyd, in the legal profession? As a judge, do you work with a team? And
it's not even close to what it would be like in a business or a team and in sports. But there is one judge who is appointed as the local administrative judge, and I was that judge for 7 years. Now, each judge, and you can imagine, judges for the most part have a lot of pride and a lot of ego. So, and they're considered independent of other judges. So they're not expected to agree with another judge. They have their own mind, their own, philosophy or of how they do things. But as the administrative judge, it was my judge to be instead of if lawyers or staff had a complaint about a judge, they needed or the people who run the court, the administration of the court building, if they needed to talk to somebody, they wanted to only talk to one judge who would then relay the message to the other judges. And the same with if different judges. So I worked with 8 judges, 7 other judges. And if they had a complaint about a staff or a lawyer, instead of hearing from different people, they wanted one person to be the spokesperson. So for me, as the administrative judge, it was my job to, let's say, calm the storms down when there were storms, and also to, in some way, make sure that the assignments that were given to different judges were spread out equally, because you didn't want one judge to be doing all of the difficult cases. You wanted to be able to spread them out among the different judges. But I wasn't sort of the coach of them. I couldn't tell them how to perform or how to do things. If they came to me, I would, say, well, this is how I would do it, or this is how I would have responded. So it's that type of environment that you're in as a judge. So it's not necessarily a team player, or people are interested in being a team, but you do want to be able to. The best thing for a lawyer is consistency. They want to know what to expect when they go into a courtroom. So there are some things that I could say were always going to be the same, but once a judge gets into a courtroom, it's entirely, they can do pretty much what they want and how they want to do it.
But for you as a judge in your courtroom, do you function solely by yourself, or is there a group of people or a team that helps you do what you need to do?
Oh yeah. Thank you for asking that question, Laura. They don't get enough credit. The clerks, the courtroom clerks. Okay, so a lot of times when you're first appointed as a judge, you've been a lawyer. I can tell you, it's like anything else. Until you're doing that other thing, you may think you know what it's like to be a coach when you were a player, but until you're a coach, then you say, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize this is all this was involved. And it's the same with the judge, all of the paperwork and all the things you have to remember. So when you first start out, your clerk who has 10 to 20, 30 years experience, they will whisper things to you about how to do it or what to write. So yeah, you're a team. And of course, again, going back to what I said about judges with their sort of pride and their arrogance, not all of them are willing to listen to the clerks, and they make,
Yeah.
as a result, they make mistakes. So you are very wise, and I tell the newly appointed judges now, listen to your clerks. You have a lot of experienced clerks. You are a team when you're in that courtroom. You work together, and everything will run a lot smoother if you two are working together than butting heads with each other. And there are times when judges and clerks butt their heads because they have different opinions about things, and you have to sort of work out, just like you do in any other business or organization, just work out working together.
That's what I think. I think in no matter what you do, in medicine, whatever, you and Tony, I distinctly remember, and I tell people, I should say this, I tell people everybody on the team is important, from the, water boy to the head, the owner, necessarily. And I distinctly remember you telling me a story of when Jim Irsay bought the same Christmas gift for everybody in the building because they're all important. And so I don't know if you could comment on that, but to me, you can't run an organization, no matter what you're doing, by yourself. You're never alone.
That is the message with a football team for sure. Everybody's important. Everybody's job contributes. So when I come into the Pittsburgh Steelers as a backup player and special teams guy who's not a star, but I felt my job was important, everybody treated it that way. And to your point, Mr. Irsay, when we went to the Super Bowl in 2006, he took every single person in the organization and their spouse to the game. He hired a separate charter to take the cook and the mailman and the secretaries and the ball boys and everybody to the game and their spouses because they were important.
And when I was growing up, I remember the Detroit Tigers won a what is it called in
World
baseball?
Series.
World Series.
Yeah.
And the owner separated them into tiers and bought them each different championship rings and said, "Oh, you think you're as good as this person?" Well, and I said, "They'll never win another championship game again. They'll never make it to the World Series again." To my knowledge, they haven't. I don't know. I haven't been watching them that close. But
right.
It's ridiculous in my mind to think that you're gonna break a team up by saying, "Oh, this one's more important than that one." You can't do anything on a team, and I don't care what profession you're in. So,
Amen.
well, let's talk a little bit about leadership. Maybe you could tell me, Tony, what leadership means to you.
Leadership to me means the person who supposedly is in charge does the most to help his group. And you talked about growing up, we had great examples of that. I can remember our mom and dad coming home and talking about their job as teachers. My job is to help my students get A's. They didn't feel like they were in charge of the boss or make the toughest environment. No, we're there to help students get A's. So I grew up with that. And when I went on Coach Knoll's staff, I didn't know anything about coaching. I asked him, "What am I supposed to do?" He said, "Your job is to help your players be better." Very simply. And so for 28 years, I tried to do that. If I can help my players be better, we're going to be better. And that's how people kind of lifted me up as a leader because I tried to help my group.
How about you, Lloyd? Do you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, so in my profession, first as a prosecutor and then as a judge, uh, uh, for and sort of adopting what Tony has said, for me, my leadership was about helping my colleagues, especially ones who were coming in after me, uh, be the best lawyer that they could be the best judge they could be. But for me, it was more related to the best person they could be. So I really emphasized how they treated people, how they were to treat people. And so for me, setting aside my sports background, which was like, 35, 36 years ago, it was words are important, But I always felt that actions have a far greater impact than words. And if your actions didn't match your words, then people will not trust you. And if they don't trust you, then they're not going to follow your example or what you're trying to ask them or consider them to do. So I always felt that visible things make stronger impressions on the mind of people, and your actions can distract from any words. So I always try
Yeah.
to, just conduct myself in the way that I was speaking to these other people and trying to make them think about things beyond the law, because all of the lawyers are smart. They're smart. They
Mm,
got through law school.
mm.
They're smart. But I was more interested in how they treated people. That was my way of being a leader in the profession of being a lawyer as well as being a judge.
I think that's important in medicine. I tell people I train and people I want to help, it doesn't matter how smart you are. You can be the smartest doctor in the world. If people don't trust you or want to come to you, you can't help them. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And particularly in my field, I deal a lot with racial disparities and outcomes, and a lot of it has to do with trust and coming and feeling comfortable with people. So I think I didn't realize that was as equally important in the legal field, but um, certainly I think it's important in everything you do. Um, Tell us did you learn any leadership skills or lessons from your parents, Lloyd, that you utilized in those interactions?
Oh, yes, you spoke about my mom a little bit earlier, but it starts with kindness and patience.
Mhm.
That's what I learned
Hmm.
from my mom. And my dad was, and not to say this wasn't from my mom, but my dad was all about integrity,
Hmm.
integrity. And my dad, he um, had strong opinions about being a hypocrite. In
Ah.
fact, what he would tell us growing up is don't straddle the fence.
Mm.
If you're going to be a believer and if you're going to follow God, be all in. And if you're going to be a sinner, be all in. Don't be both. Don't be both. He really despised being a hypocrite. And so, the kindness, the humility of and then the integrity, and of course, compassion and empathy and patience. My mother was so patient. I mean, she had 10 children and numerous grandchildren living in the house as we were growing up. So, and my mom, her always before you left my mom, she would say, be kind and be strong. And she made it clear that life is not easy, that there are going to be many, many hard times, and you have to be strong mentally. And she meant strong in the Lord, because these hard times can make you want to give up if you aren't mentally strong. And my dad was always about keeping hold of God's unchanging hand. It was one of his favorite songs. And to cast all your troubles onto him and to trust that he will give you enough strength to endure those difficult times. So
Amen.
those are the things that I learned from my parents. They've been so helpful in my teaching career as a teacher in law school. My prosecutorial career and my judge career was how I treated people. I'm not. When I was appointed as the judges who I now was working with, all of them said to me, the reason we wanted you as a judge was we observed how you treated people, everyone, from the accused to the other lawyers, to the witnesses, to the judges, to the staff. We knew that you were smart. A lot of lawyers are smart, but it was all of those other personal characteristics that you caused you to stand out. And all of them came from primarily my parents. And obviously I was blessed to have coaches who taught the same messages as my parents. And I was blessed to have mentors who taught the same messages as my parents. So I didn't have people telling me, oh, no, 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 no. If you want to be successful in law, you got to do it this way. You can't have all of that empathy or compassion. You got to be cutthroat or whatever the case may be. I never had those types of bosses or leaders in my life. So I was, God is, I mean, it's through God's grace and mercy and love that I'm here primarily because he made all of this happen. Because if I had my plan, as you talked about earlier about having your plan, if I had my plan, Lord, I don't think I would have, if my plan had worked out the way I wanted, I'm not sure that I would be sitting here talking to you and Tony today or have the wife that I have and the children that I have. I just don't think it would have been possible.
Do
It's
you
funny,
think those
Lloyd,
trips?
listening. I was going to say, listening to you, I feel like I grew up in your house because we
Yeah.
get the same thing. And my mother talked about uh, treating people the right way and being kind and being encouraging. I was speaking at an event not too long ago, and this guy approached me afterwards. He said, "You don't know me. I grew up in your hometown. I'm younger than you are, but I had your mom in high school." And this was a white gentleman. He said, "I was taught that we were not supposed to like black people, that black people
Mm,
were evil." And he said, "And I had your mom in high school, and I found out people were telling me the wrong thing
mm,
because your mom didn't approach it that way. No matter, even though I was not responsive, she won me over by how she was. And that's the way we were taught about leadership. The other side of the coin was my dad, and Lauren can attest to this. No matter what I would tell him, I'd go to him and say, and the coach didn't put me in today. The teacher gave me a C. Whatever the problem was, he would sit there and listen. Then he would say, "Okay, I got it. Now, what are you going to do to make it
what
better?"
are you gonna do? Exactly.
And
Yeah.
oh, no sympathy, no empathy, no. Okay, yeah, I get it. What are you going to do to make it better? So between the two of those, okay, what can I do to make the situation better? How can I encourage and treat people the right way and help them grow? That's leadership to me that I got from our parents.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Lloyd, do you think those trips to the welfare office helped in that regard as well to have a little bit more empathy and other things? I just think it's amazing how God sort of works some of those things together to give you experiences that I've not experienced that, but I want to have empathy for that. And so, as you said, it takes a little bit of,
Oh, yeah. Isn't it something how you get to a point in life and you look back on things. And at the time, you didn't realize the value of it at the time.
Mhm.
You didn't realize, why is this happening? You might even ask that question. Why is this happening to me? But years later, you realize why it happened. And it made a complete difference. Certainly going to
Yeah.
welfare. There were times and there still are times. And even when I have young people in my courtroom who have done something wrong, sometimes I will say to them, because their parents are there in court and they're embarrassed to be there. And I'll say, the only difference between your son and me at the same age was that your son got caught doing what he was doing.
There for the grace of God.
Yeah.
Amen.
And
Yes.
all the lawyers look up there because, they did, what? Did he just say he did something like that when he,
Yeah.
yes, yes. The only difference. And so, having the background that I had and, having older brothers and doing silly things, all of that. And yes, going to the welfare office and people are embarrassed to say we call it, it's not called welfare anymore here in Ontario. It's called Ontario Works, but people are embarrassed to admit that. So, I will sometimes say, listen, 12 years before I was a judge, I was on welfare for 3 months.
Mm.
And that's another thing that surprises people because they don't know my whole story. And as you said in the introduction, people think you are where you're at and everything was great and went so well for you all along the way.
Never had any problems.
But
Yeah.
I tell a lot of my students, I am near the front of the line of people who've made mistakes. So don't treat me based on my title. Get to know me and then treat me the way you see how I treat you and other people. Yeah.
Yeah, I will tell you one thing that I learned from your mom, which, it was just I don't know, when I finally old enough to pay attention to when people talk. I like to sit with the older people and just listen to them talk. And she was talking about an apple pie that she made for all you 10 kids and how she couldn't make it over again. And she was just shaking chili powder on it, thinking it was
Yeah.
paprika. And she said, I couldn't like not cook it. And so I cooked it and they said, "Oh, this is the best pie we ever had." And what I learned from that, I don't know what she said, but what I learned from that is keep going, and do the best you can. And people make mistakes, but it doesn't always. That's one of the first lessons I learned from her. Just her telling a funny story and just the way she told it, and how that's all we had and that's what we had to do.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
and to Tony's point, I remember my mom always saying, "You can only be and say who you are," and so that taught me to um, keep watching people, because eventually the true them is going to come out, but you should be who you are, not to be who other people are.
Yeah.
And to that point, there's so many lessons, and I quote my mom and stuff all the time, but there are lessons you can learn from everybody. I'd
Hmm.
like to know what lessons you all learn, maybe from people who are in leadership over you. That I tell people, grab what you want. Residents come, they say, "Oh, all these people, they do things differently, and it's just so frustrating." I'm like, that's what you want. You want to get different ideas of how to handle something. You choose the ones you want to use. You don't only want to know one way and then it doesn't work. And so I think there's leadership skills you probably all learned from, both of you, from people you worked under. What are some, Tony, that you had that you adopted because you liked that from people who were above you?
No question. Lloyd talked about being involved with people who did things the same way as his parents. My first meeting with Coach Knoll, I'm a rookie player with the Pittsburgh Steelers, 1977. He's got all the rookies in there. He says, "Welcome to the National Football League. You're now getting paid to play football, so that makes it your profession. But don't make football your whole life. If you make football your whole life, you're going to leave the game disappointed." And I remember that was 50 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. And I remember writing down, this guy sounds just like my mom and dad, but he lived that out for us. And he wanted to win, and no question about it, but he spent family time. We had families there on Saturdays. He made sure you got home to your families at a time. There was no, we're going to be here 24/7, none of that. And he showed me that you could be excellent at your job and your profession and still be a husband, a father, part of the community, and that lesson stayed with me forever.
Yeah, and I know that certainly people approach me all the time. That's something that Indianapolis really appreciated about you when you were a coach here, and that it was a community thing and not just strictly football.
Yeah. They actually made the rookies, you had to do 1 day a week, your off
Mm.
day community service. So it wasn't a big thing to me, but Lloyd, you can imagine if you're talking to some high profile judge and say, but now you're going to have to do 1 day of community service. But it had an impact on us. It made us see that, hey, yeah, not everyone has the same advantages we have and the same blessings. And it gave us that empathy.
Hmm.
Amen. How about you, Lloyd? Any leadership
Yeah.
lessons you?
Yeah, one of the first lessons I learned from a very he was my university football coach for my first 2 years. Um, One of the things that I always stuck with me was that he said there is no supposed to or destiny or fate without hard work and smart decisions. So I always, remembered that I'm not supposed to be here. It's not my destiny without, you have to put in the hard work and you have to make smart decisions. That was more from the sports background. But one of the things that I learned from this judge who I had mentioned earlier, who turned out to be very close friends with one of my bosses I had as a teenager, and the boss wrote the letter to this judge. One of the things I learned from him over the years was how much people um, relate and learn more from your failures than your successes,
Ah,
and
Yeah.
that your value really doesn't come from what you accomplished. It comes from the knowledge and wisdom that you've acquired along the way. And so to talk about, as long as it's in the right situation and people you can trust to share with and it's going to help them,
mhm,
is to
mhm.
talk about your struggles during your career and tell them how you dealt with them. That is what is going to allow you to help others in ways you never could have if everything had gone according to plan. So that was something to me, because I looked up to him when I first became a judge, and ultimately as he started to deteriorate in health in life, I became a close friend of his. And so as years went on, he became much more vulnerable to share with me about his failures, and it just made such a difference hearing how he overcame some of the things he didn't do well or he didn't do right, and he wanted to share them with me so that I wouldn't make the same mistakes, or I could maybe do it a different way if I had the same uh, uh, opportunity or experience come my way.
I think that's so valuable. I think people, particularly young people, they think they have to be perfect in everything, and I have to get all A's, and I have to do this, be the best whatever football player, and I have to be, and nobody's perfect. And to realize, yeah, I failed, or where would maybe a lot of the people that you interacted with as a judge be if you had succeeded and gone on a path being the baseball player or whatever? All I imagine people who are blessed by you as a judge, and attorneys and other staff members who worked with you, had you not gone a different path. So, but even so, everybody has failures, and I think young people, I talk to my daughters all the time, and they're like, "Oh, this one test I didn't do the best on." Well, that go find out what you need to learn and learn more about that specific topic, and you'll be a greater teacher of that subject when you decide to go into that path. So,
thank you for listening in today. Weren't you inspired, encouraged, and uplifted? We hope so, because we're praying the best for you. Join us again next time for more betterment, because the better you are, the better you are.